If other people don't have boundaries, you better, because you're going to resent them. It's not going to work out well.
We talk all the time in our channel about understanding men that will lead to a better marriage. Well, having a better relationship with your mother-in-law is not that much different. You need to understand her.
That's a situation where if he says, we need to do what mom wants, and you don't, that can be a big problem.
She raised the man that you love. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Fascinating Womanhood channel, where we talk about everything that has to do with developing femininity and building strong, long-lasting, loving relationships. I am Cherry Lynn, and I'm here with my mom, Dixie Andelin Forsyth. Hi.
Hi.
So today we are talking about challenges with your mother-in-law.
Honey, your mother-in-law is coming.
Your mother is coming?
Yes, yes.
Oh my God.
Honey, a mother-in-law is a mother-in-law. Don't take any chances.
Don't you talk to my mom in that tone of voice, you hear?
You really think your mother will like me?
Of course she will, honey.
We put this question out there on our social media recently and asked if anyone had questions about the relationship with their in-laws, and we were flooded with questions about this. Not too surprising, and we've been through this as well, and we got a lot of really interesting questions. So we wanted to do a video today, kind of discuss why so many women are challenged with their relationship with their mother-in-law, and talk about what's possibly going on. Why does this keep happening to so many of us? And then talk about three really common, we're calling it awkward sandwiches that you might be in with your mother-in-law. And what are some things you can do to have a little bit less stress? Because honestly, it's never just going to go away. But I think there's a lot of tips that we can discuss today about how to move forward with your mother-in-law and have a little less stress, or a lot less. First of all, I want to clear up one thing, and maybe you can answer this. Why is it so much about the mother-in-law and not as much about the father-in-law?
I've thought about that quite a bit. And I think it's really because mothers-in-law, just like us, they're women, they're more interested in relationships. And it's relationships that get us into trouble, not so much fathers-in-law, who are usually more about task. And he's a man, and he's not as interested in how you treat it can happen with a father-in-law, but it's more often about a mother-in-law, I think, because they're relationship oriented, just like us.
Well, and we're talking about a woman and her son versus a man and his son. And I know there are so many problems with fathers-in-law too. We get questions about that too, but I think it happens more often, like you said, with the women. As a woman myself with a son, he's not grown, I can understand a little bit of how that might feel. It's probably, you've experienced it, so I'd love to hear how that feels.
For a mother, this is her son. This is her baby. For a father, he doesn't think this is my baby. Just to clarify though, some mothers-in-law are wonderful. Some are just like angels, and they're just so grateful that you married their son, and they're protective of you. And
yes, but there's still problems. Even the greatest ones, there's still small misunderstandings. And we've received questions from all the way from nothing's working to things are mostly great, but I have this one area with her that I struggle with. So we kind of want to address all of those today. Do you think any of this can apply to women watching that are mother-in-laws?
Yes. I mean, I am one. And when I was one, I thought, oh no, I'm a mother-in-law.
Oh no.
Oh no, because then you're suddenly in that dreaded camp and you think, what am I supposed to do? I want to be a great mother-in-law. I want to be close to my in-law children. It's hard. It's hard because you think you got that label on you. You're not a mother-in-law now, but you will be one day.
Right. So, and you've seen both sides of it. You've been in the position of the woman asking questions about her mother-in-law, and now your mother-in-law has passed away, and now you're the mother-in-law. So you can see full circle of all of this. So
and on both sides of it, there's a lot of this that we have to recognize that we always say this, we cannot change another person. And that includes if you're a mother-in-law, You can't change your daughters or sons-in-law. It goes, like you say, full circle, both ways. We want to have really close relationships with all of our children and their spouses.
Before we dig into the 3 kind of common awkward sandwiches that you get into with your mother-in-law, we talked a little bit about why this is a common problem. I was researching before we started this video, something like 60% of women all across the globe. I don't know if this is true or how accurate, but we'll talk about this being a problem. That's a lot of women, and that's just the women that will fess up to it, right? No,
you have to dare to fess up to it.
This is a big problem.
Yeah.
Why is it such a big problem? We talked a little bit about the mom versus the father, but getting a little deeper into the mom, like, why is this so difficult?
Well, we've talked before about the mother bear. This is the mother bear colliding with her perceived danger of her cub. And by the way, as a, like you say, full circle, if you don't have adult children, sorry, ladies, they will always be your children. Even if they're 40 years old, they will always be you think about them as your kids.
I'm engaged. I'm engaged. I'm getting married.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Dad, I met a man in Rome, and he's wonderful and brilliant, and we're getting married.
And you don't think, well, they're grown, therefore I have no responsibilities. They are always your children.
For those of us that have small kids, I don't have grown kids, I can absolutely imagine that already. I can already see it, like looking at your adult kid and seeing them as a baby. It's just,
and you have to constantly remind yourself, they're an adult.
Yeah,
they've got to make their own decisions. They're adult.
The other thing that I want to add about why this is such a big problem for me anyway, just the experiences that I've had. I think a lot of women, especially when they first get married, you choose your husband, you select him for your partner in life. Mm-hmm. And you don't select your mother-in-law. And I think that is really, really challenging. You select him and she kind of comes with, and
everybody comes with, even his crazy Uncle Eddie, or what.
Everyone comes with.
Everybody comes with.
The challenge comes with those women that kind of resist that subconsciously. I'm not marrying her, I'm marrying him. And it's like, well, but she kind of comes with.
You marry the whole group.
Yeah. And that's where I think it becomes difficult, there's a lot of resistance to that. And it doesn't mean that you're marrying her, but it means that that's a relationship that you have to develop and you're responsible for. And that can be incredibly difficult.
Can be. That's what life's about. There's all kinds of challenges. And you know what? We can do this. This is why we're doing this video, to help you navigate this just a little bit better.
Okay. So what is the first most common issue? I think this isn't really necessarily in order, but I do think this one is the most common. So let's just get this one out.
It was for me.
Yeah.
It was for me. Boundary issues. That's one of the reasons I included a chapter on boundaries in my book, Fascinating Womanhood for the Timeless Woman, because boundaries are so important and people often don't understand boundaries. They cross them, they step on them. And so we're going to give you some ideas of what kind of boundaries get jumped on or crossed over. And it's in 4 different areas, because some of the questions that were asked, like privacy, the privacy between you and your husband and your children. Unsolicited advice. Anybody ever got that? Yeah, I got that. Your husband confiding in his mother about your marriage. That's a boundary problem. And the last one is money.
Those are all big boundary subjects.
Money issues.
We could do a video about just that. But to keep it kind of compact today, those things are all really difficult. So what do we do about it? You got your mom coming in and stepping over your boundaries. You have this immediate reaction to maybe like fight her, or you freeze, or maybe both.
If some of you are like me, I don't hide things very well, even if I don't say anything. I get,
see it
and expressions. Yeah, it's kind of, my mother used to say, you wear your heart on your sleeve. And I didn't know how to help that. So I got the unsolicited advice. And looking back now, I think it's because she was trying to be helpful. She did have a lot more experience with children, but her raising of her kids was quite different than my mother's. And I was used to her style. I didn't really agree with some of it. I did. some of it I didn't. So what do you do about it? The worst one, in my opinion, on here is husband confiding in his mom about your marriage.
That's really tough. It's like
Because-
it's almost like the mama's boy.
Y'all hear what Mama said? Yeah. Come on, Mama.
Well,
of
if it
phrase.
happened to me, fortunately it didn't happen to me, but if it did, I would feel kind of betrayed. Some of it could be his culture, his confiding in her about your marriage. He may not understand that's a boundary issue. She may not understand it's a boundary issue. And the same thing with the unsolicited advice, that's the easier one to tackle, because you can always just pre-decide when she does it to just say, oh, that's a thought. Thank you for the advice. It doesn't mean you have to do it. You have to decide what hill to die on. You can give her credit for having offered without commitment to following it. My mother-in-law didn't have any problem feeding children hot fudge sundaes for breakfast. My family wasn't like that. My mother was a health nut, as I've said before. And the idea of giving my 2-year-old brownies and ice cream for breakfast did not sit well with me. In those cases, there's nothing to do. It's not going to ruin their lives if they have that for a couple of days while we're visiting. But as a lifestyle, I certainly didn't have to put up with it. Now, if we lived with her, it would be a lot more of a challenge. And when we're visiting, I can tolerate that more. For one summer, we lived with them when Bob was going to school. And that's where we had the clashes, because she would suggest how long to let the kids stay up at night.
So you're saying, it sounds like the tip that you're saying for the unsolicited advice is like raising your kids. In a way, you kind of tolerated it unless it was a regular thing. If it became a regular thing, that's when you felt like you had to kind of approach it differently.
And then I would have Bob talk to his mother.
How did you do that?
I would talk to him privately and say, this is going on. Could you have a talk with your mom? Because it was her house and he was her son. And just say, this is what we're doing. Because
what would you have done, though, if he had said, that's just my mom? Like if he hadn't cooperated? Because I think there's a lot of questions that come in about the husbands being very protective of their mothers.
That's true. That's
what would you
true.
do?
What would I do? If it was something major, I would have a private talk with her. And by major, I mean, not something like, I hate to say it, but the hot fudge sundae for breakfast is not major. It may feel major, but it is not major. Even when to put your kids down at night is not major. What would be major is letting them play unattended in a yard where there's a busy street and they could get run over or something like that. In which case I would talk to her and just say, I'm really worried about this. Do you think you could help me? Try to have that relationship. The big catch is not to become resentful. That's going to come out in barbed ways. That bleeds into accepting someone at face value. And we're going to talk a little bit later on here about what you can do about that.
Part of this is just practicing and learning with the whole like getting in on your kids and giving advice. Like they're just trying to help. And if you can kind of start to kind of see, okay, well, this is really important to her, or this is an area where she feels like she really wants to help. She wants to be a grandmother. She wants to be an important part of your kid's life. Maybe that's just how her way of doing it. And maybe it comes off really, really poorly sometimes, but you understanding that and then allowing a little bit of tolerance, it sounds like is
sometimes a lot of tolerance. It's accepting her. My mother-in-law will serve ice cream for breakfast. Okay, she serves ice cream for breakfast. She didn't always. I mean, she served oatmeal. But if you felt like a banana split, she'd serve you one. It was that kind of thing.
It's a special time that your kids have with grandma.
She grew up during the Great Depression. She figured that all food had energy and was good. And it was an adjustment for me, but accepting her rather than trying to change her.
What about the boundary issue with the husband confiding, though, in his mom?
Husband confiding in his mom about your marriage is something you have to talk with him about. This is not a time for girlishness. This is a time for how you feel. Now, don't attack him. Because anyone who's attacked feels defensive. Yeah. Everybody is. Us, him, everybody does. When you approach it as I feel like you are doing something. That's not
that's not a feeling.
No, that's not really what we're talking about. But say, I feel hurt when this happens. I feel could you do this? This is private between us. Our marriage is private. If you are concerned about our marriage, let's go and talk to a professional or a minister or something like that. I know you're close to your mother, but I feel left out.
Right.
And I feel hurt. I feel left out. If he doesn't care about, or, then you have to set boundaries. If you do this, I will feel resentful. If you do this, I will feel resentful. Or if it's even worse than that, if you do this, I can't do it. I'm going to, whatever it is you feel you must do. Because Bob said, and he said it often on Our Whole Married Life, if other people don't have boundaries, you better.
Right.
Because you're going to resent them. It's not going to work out well.
I think the same thing goes with money. When loaning money, this is a big one. They want to help with money. You don't want that, or there's money being loaned and you don't know about it. Like, I've heard so many things about this, and it's almost identical advice.
I know a family, the custom that had developed in that nuclear family was, hey, Aunt Joe is visiting. You will have to pay for a lot of their stuff because they'll say, oh, sorry, I don't have money for this. And then they never pay you back. It's understood between them. In this particular couple, they couldn't afford it. Mm-hmm. They couldn't afford to do that. It made them very uncomfortable. So together, they had to set a boundary and say, we're not, what they just said is we can't afford to do it.
Which is just honest and direct.
I can't afford to do it. Yeah, I can't afford to do this. Sorry.
Well, and we're going to talk a little bit about cultural things in a minute, because that's one of the things that we're going to discuss more in detail. But I do think there is something that crosses with boundaries and cultures. And I think there are understanding very deeply, understanding what's going on with his family and how he was raised. It's not even necessarily a different country, or like you said earlier, it could just be the way he was raised. But understanding all of that is incredibly important when it comes to boundaries, because you can't really set an appropriate boundary if you don't understand those things. And
it's not fair for you to say, my boundary is you've got to do it like my culture. He's not going to change his culture because you demand that he does. And it's not even right to.
I'm married to somebody from a different culture, and I had to learn a lot of these things very, very early. And I'm glad that I did, because in my husband's culture, it's just normal that when your parents are elderly, you take care of them financially. It's just normal. And that's not something that I was raised with. So I could see that turning into something where I'm resentful and it becomes a boundary issue. But just touching on that a little bit, because I think they coincide just a little bit with each other. You really, really are going to want to understand that very, very specifically. Ask a lot of questions about this if you can, because it will lead to less headaches down the road.
Yes.
Okay, that's the first one, boundaries, big one. The second one is the battle of the mothering instincts.
Which is the core of why I think that there's more problems with mothers-in-law than fathers-in-law, because we have these mothering instincts.
You have the mother-in-law, you have you as a mother, you might even have your mother, you got all the mothers.
All the mothers, and they're all bears. Yes. Okay.
What are we talking about? What are some examples?
Okay, here's some examples. Your mother doesn't get along with his mother. Your mother-in-law plays favorites with grandchildren. When I saw that question, I thought, I've experienced that through my parents.
And I've received so many messages from women about this. This is bad. And it gets really, really hard the older your kids get.
And then there's a passive-aggressive personality, somebody who's vindictive, disagreeable. And then there's different religions, different faiths.
Yeah.
That can be really tough, because that's a deep part of people.
This one gets really deep, and this is where it gets really emotional. This is the toughest part, I think, of what we're talking about. I think the boundaries is the most common, but it's probably the easiest to kind of like come up with solutions, whereas this one is the most emotional one.
Well, especially if it's faith. Now, if it's a different faith, you probably knew about this before you married him. This shouldn't come as a huge shock unless they change faiths. If your mother doesn't, to me, if your mother doesn't get along with his mother, hopefully that's not too bad, because they can avoid interactions. If you can, don't invite them to Thanksgiving all at the same time, Or
Right.
even if it is a couple of times a year, you just put up with it. I doubtful you're going to all be living together.
Hopefully not. But yeah, minimizing
Contact
Yeah.
is probably the easiest thing to do with that. Your mother-in-law plays favorites. Well, in my story, we grew up and figured it out and thought, aha. And she played favorites. It affected our ability to have a close relationship with some cousins.
But here's the thing. If you are worried about her loving someone more than another one, I think try to get away from that word love, because she may just bond with one over another. And it may appear as though she loves them more because she showers them with more gifts or affection or whatever it is, but you can't really help who you have a really, really strong bond with. And you might have a favorite as a child and then have a favorite as a teenager, and it might appear that you're playing favorites, but you're appreciating different things about different children at different times in their lives.
That's true. And I know my mother connected really strongly with some of her grandkids more than others, because as looking in at it, they were kind of like her. So she connected with them.
You can't help that.
No,
I mean,
you can't.
That
You can't
sounds
help it.
so hard to accept, but
The relationship with their grandmother can be important, but it isn't the only one. So if your mother-in-law is kind of playing favorites with one of your kids, there'll be other people in their lives, especially you and your husband, who will validate them. You can explain grandma. And besides, I have been accused of playing favorites with different of my children. And when I hear it, I think, what? I don't feel that way. I don't feel that way. So they can perceive something that isn't exactly how she feels.
But again, you have different bonds with different people. And I think there's something that you need to respect about that. And I know that that can be difficult, especially when the mother-in-law is coming across as hurtful, and she might really deeply hurt your feelings. There's a part of this that you need to try to understand and accept about her.
A person with this third one here, the passive-aggressive personality, disagreeable, vindictive, they're unhappy people. They're the ones who do this. Unhappy people who are either in physical pain, emotional pain. If you can learn to try and understand them better, why they are that way, and be patient and tolerant with people like that. Sometimes when people are afraid or have low self-esteem, they react poorly. Instead of being kind, they react badly. And
I think that's such a good point, that people that are unhappy or coming across as aggressive, passive aggressive, vindictive, they are deep down, they're hurting. They wouldn't be acting like that, or like you said, afraid. And understanding that is a really, really big part of this whole video. It's just understanding her. We talk all the time in our channel about understanding men that will lead to a better marriage. Well, having a better relationship with your mother-in-law is not that much different. You need to understand her, and she raised the man that you love.
that's true. You can always be grateful for that.
She did something good. I mean, she did. Remembering that she brought him up, there's a reason why you fell in love with him, and she is a part of that. I mean, I know not in every case, there may be some moms that were distant and so forth, but in most situations that we hear about, that is true. She raised him.
Unless she's a criminal or something like
Right.
that. Once in a while, there's somebody that's got a real sociopathic personality. Then the only thing you can do is try to minimize contact, and
Right.
minimize and be kind and just minimize it as much as you can, because some people are truly troubled.
One thing that has really helped me with my relationship with my mother-in-law is remembering that. And with her specifically, my husband's father passed away when he was really, really young. And she was a single mom of 3 boys for a really long time. And she worked so hard, and she did a great job. And remembering that, I constantly still remember that. We've been married 12 years. Like she went through so much, and she doesn't have a she could have easily said, well, my son's a criminal because but she didn't. She did a really, really good job raising him, and he's a great man.
Yeah.
And remembering that is so important.
Well, you know what that does? It helps you, makes you feel gratitude for them. When you feel gratitude for anything or anyone, it softens you. And there's always something to be grateful for. Like look at my mother-in-law, and I'm so grateful that before I met him, she was so good to him, that
Yeah.
she raised him for me. She raised him for me, and I'm grateful that she did and that she loved him because I love him. And
Right.
so we have that connection.
In terms of different faiths, I definitely think the most common issue out there is that you don't really know what you're getting into when you get married. You know it, but you don't really accept it. And then down the road, you're hoping for things to be different, and they aren't.
If you develop a spiritual closeness to him, in other words, you share your deepest ideas about life after death, God, all those things, and you're kind of on the same page, you're not as much going to have this problem, because if he is of a completely different faith than you and you've connected on a spiritual level, you'll find the things that are the same.
Well, but where does the mother-in-law part come in on this?
Because if the mother-in-law part comes in, is if you don't have that connection with him, your spiritual intimacy, that's where your mother-in-law can cause trouble in your relationship. If she, tries to influence her son, and in other words, going to that church or doing that tradition, or
an example that I have from someone that shared with me, the mother-in-law wanted the child baptized in a certain church. Like, what would you do about that?
that's a boundary jump, because that's a decision between husband and wife.
Mm-hmm.
Grandparents don't have legal rights here. That's a situation where if he says, we need to do what mom wants and you don't, that can be a big problem. The closer your relationship with your husband, the more easily that's solved. It's going to involve compromise on both sides. When your child gets older, they may be more inclined towards your faith, maybe a completely different one, and they will make their own decision at some point in their life. These things can all be worked out more smoothly than not. It doesn't mean it's going to be no problem. It's the smoothest way to do it and have your marriage intact, which is what our goal is.
Okay, and then the last one is just overall communication battle.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Whenever they try to be funny, it comes out perverse or terrifying.
I see.
You'll get used to it.
There's 3 of these. The first one is voicing your opinions with children or grandchildren. Cultural differences, big one. And when they stay with you or visit your home, and how to prepare for that. That's one that I find actually kind of fun, because I've learned it a long time ago, and I think you did too. When they stay with you, we're going to do that last one first. What I do, if they have different, like in the case of my parents are were more health nuts. Actually, it was more my mom, not my dad. But it was they were more health nuts. My in-laws were different. Now, my in-laws, when they came to visit, they would eat anything. They didn't demand certain things. They were very compliant. But when I went to visit them, if they didn't have the kind of foods that my children liked, because that happens a lot, your children don't like beans, they like this, but they don't like that, then I would bring some of those specific things that my kids only liked. Like, I had some picky eaters, and I would bring those things rather than expect them to provide it.
But where does that fall under communication? What do you think is happening there?
What happens is I had to present it as though I was thinking of them. I didn't want you to have to do this. And I know you do that. When you come visit me, I don't always know your children's, what they hate, what they like. Sometimes you'll bring stuff they like. And I don't find it, of course, we're not in-laws, I don't find that offensive at all. If anyone says, I find it thoughtful.
The reason why we put this under communication is that it can be the root cause of a lot of hurt feelings and misunderstandings when it comes to food. Like, so if I were to go to my mother-in-law's home and she prepares all this really, spicy kind of Mexican food, because that's what she cooks, and I don't know how to handle that with my kids, that can cause a big hurt between the two of us, because food is really, really big. And that bleeds into the staying thing. When you're staying with them or they're staying with you, same thing. If you're only providing food that is really what your kids like, and you don't really think about them or take them into consideration, you're going to have a lot of hurt feelings. I think with food, it's really, really big, but it's also big with plans. When they're coming to stay with you, or maybe you guys are going on vacation together and you don't agree with the agenda. communication is a big
Communication is,
thing, because like we mentioned earlier, you didn't marry them. You didn't marry her. You married your husband, and you don't know all
Well,
of
you
her
actually
ins and
did
outs.
marry her, but you didn't know it.
Well, you didn't think that you were going to have
You
to
didn't
kind of
realize,
have
yeah.
this. Yeah. And so, I mean, I've been on vacation with my in-laws, and the communication is very, very important when you're going on vacation with anybody, let alone your in-laws. And being able to prepare for that is really, really important. And it's difficult because these are different people and they vacation differently than you do. And your husband might totally understand how she vacations and you don't. Or maybe it's not even a vacation. Maybe it's just a birthday party and they're coming over, and you didn't want them to give your kid this gift that's, extravagant or something. And you have communication barriers. So what's the answer when some of this crosses over with boundaries? But what's the answer?
It does, but everything, it involves accepting at face value. Like, oh, my mother-in-law likes to give extravagant gifts. I would have liked that actually when we were going to school because we were poor. But there's other things that I didn't like so much that she did. But that's where tolerance, I cannot change her. If my goal is to try and change her, I'm going to be working forever and just being resentful because I'm not going to. The key here is learning to understand her. Have you ever thought about what was her life like growing up? Right. Where's she from? What did she go through? Like my mother-in-law went through the Great Depression. First of all, it'll show that you're interested in her and her life. What was it like then? Where did she fall in her family? What experiences did she have to go through? Something really traumatic like the death of her father. How was that for her? And as you understand a person, you're a lot more tolerant. You just are. And then they are more tolerant of you because they don't perceive you pushing and trying to change them. Like my mother-in-law, I learned that her favorite color was green. When I got her something to wear for a gift, I always looked for green stuff, and she thought that was very thoughtful. Developing a relationship with her wherever you possibly can, and that's going to involve getting to know her. She's not just your mother-in-law. She's Mary. She's Sally. She's a woman.
Right. I think this is so great what you're saying, and this is so important. So important. I know it's at the end of the video, but it's just like it's one of the most important things I can think of is getting to know her. And I think a lot of the questions that come to us about mother-in-laws have one common theme, and I don't mean to say this in an offensive way, but it is a selfish theme.
She must think I'm an awful dope. I wouldn't be surprised if she had our marriage,
And we don't even realize it. I do it. You've probably done it. We've all done it. We feel selfish. We are thinking about ourselves. We are protective of our kids, protective of our husbands, and we're only thinking of us, and we're not thinking of her. And all these things you're talking about getting to know her, I promise if you flip the tables and can stop focusing so much on what's going wrong with you and how you feel and how the boundaries and all the things we've talked about coming full circle, if you start to focus on her and getting to know her, you are not going to be as upset. You are not going to have as many miscommunications, misunderstandings, because you're going to understand her and why she is the way she is. She's going to notice and she's going to pull back.
And you're going to be on her side more than you thought. You're going to be on her side. And as you understand her, you'll be more sympathetic to her. Your relationship will be better and she'll trust you more.
And I promise it's not you. You're not having these problems because she doesn't like you. Maybe there's some things that she doesn't understand about you too.
Probably.
But
it's the same
honestly,
thing.
Any woman that would have married her son, she's probably going to treat them similarly because of all the things we've already talked about. It's her kid, it's her baby. There's all these things, there's these insecurities, and just take the focus off of you. It would have been anybody probably that she would have a hard time with, and get to know her. I love that story you told about the color green. What is she like? Do you when she comes over, do you have something special for her?
Does she have a favorite dish?
Even if she did bug you the other day, or she stepped over boundaries the other day and you're mad, just make her favorite thing or bring her favorite flowers, have them around.
For no reason is better than if it's her birthday. I mean, it's great when it's her birthday, but I was thinking of you.
This has been a really, hopefully a really helpful conversation. I've really enjoyed talking about this, and I know it's hard and it's never going to be perfect. The whole goal of this is just to hopefully eliminate some of the stress and feel like you can personally develop yourself in order to just grow closer to her.
Her and all the people in your life. That's what Fascinating Womanhood is for.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for watching, and thank you so much for sharing all of your wonderful advice with us. If you haven't read Dixie's book, Fascinating Womanhood for the Timeless Woman, you're definitely missing out. You need to read it. You will find out so much more about developing femininity if you will read her book. We also have it in an audiobook and a workbook that goes along with it. So you definitely have to check all those links attached to the video. We're also very active on social media. If you have any questions you want to send to us, you can even post them anonymously in our group and get our advice. Definitely join. All the links are attached to this video as well. And we are here every week. So if you want to support our channel, click subscribe and like, and also just comment. If you have any comments about things that you do, any stories that you want to share with us, comment down below and we would love to hear from you. We will see you next time.
See you next week.